Welcome to Castle Academy, Episode 5. In the last lesson, we incorporated logic and variables into our game to create win and lose states. In this lesson, we'll create obstacles that modify how our ball behaves, expand our world with camera movement, and add a leaderboard so players can compete for high scores. We'll start by creating our first obstacle. In real golf, sand traps are a common hazard. If your ball lands in one, it gets stuck and barely moves when you hit it. We'll create our own sand trap by forking our grass blueprint, renaming it, upping friction to 3, and changing its color to yellow with the fill tool. Let's make room for our new obstacle and drag the sand blocks into our game. If we tested this right now, our sand trap would behave pretty much like the grass blocks, aside from the increased friction. We want our golf ball to feel heavier and harder to move, just like a real sand trap. We can achieve this by temporarily increasing our ball's gravity when it's in the trap. First, let's quickly add a tag for our ball so we can reference it in our logic. Then, let's go to the Sand Traps Logic tab and create a new rule. We want the ball to be modified once it lands in the sand, so for our rules trigger, we'll use a collision between the sand and the ball. For the response, we want the ball's gravity to increase, not the sand traps. So let's select Tell the colliding actor to perform. Any response we write inside here will be an action that the ball performs instead of the sand trap. Our sand trap is telling the colliding actor, in this case the ball, to execute the responses. Let's add a response and select Modify a property. We want to change our ball's gravity, so tap Select Property, scroll down to Gravity, and select Strength. Bump up gravity strength to 5. Now we can test it out. That feels a lot more realistic. There are many different things you can do by modifying an actor's properties. You can modify the ball's width and height scale so it becomes bigger or smaller. You could modify the ball's X and Y position to teleport it somewhere else. You could even change the way the ball looks. To do that, let's first go into the ball's artwork section and create a new frame. Let's use the pen tool to make it look like there's clumps of sand on the ball. Then return to the Sand Traps Logic tab, tap on the rule, and add a new response to modify a property. Tap Select Property and choose Current Frame. Since we drew the sand on the second frame, set it to 2. Now our sand trap makes the ball heavier and covered in sand. But the ball can't be heavy and sandy forever. What about when it's back on the grass? We need to write a rule for our grass block that changes the ball back to normal. Since we're basically doing the same thing our sand block did, let's copy our sand block's rule by clicking into it and tapping Copy. Now go to the Grass's Logic tab and tap on Paste. Click into the rule, modify gravity to 1, and change the current frame to 1. Now if we test it out, the ball returns to normal when it lands on the grass. Now that we know how to modify properties, we can create all kinds of interesting challenges to make our game more complex. But we still have very limited space to work with. So far, our golf course has been contained to the boundaries of our camera viewport. Even if we build things outside of it, we can't see or reach it. If we want to build bigger worlds, our viewport needs to be able to move around, which we can do by having our camera follow an actor. There are a few ways we can do this. The simplest way is by going into your ball's logic tab and creating a rule that makes the camera follow the ball as soon as the ball is created, which is effectively when the game starts. Let's try it out. We can see that the camera follows the ball exactly. While this technically solves our first problem, we have a new problem whenever we fall off the platform. In the last episode, we established a rule that makes our player lose the game when the ball falls out of the viewport. But now that our camera tracks the ball perfectly, we'll never exit the viewport, meaning we'll never lose the game and we'll keep falling forever. So let's delete the rule we just made. So what can we do instead? Well, what if our camera moved slower than our ball? That way, when the ball falls, the camera can't catch up and the ball will fall out of our viewport. Plus, the camera feels a lot smoother since it's not replicating all the fast, jerky movements the ball makes. How do we do that? We can't modify the camera speed in our existing rule, but we can make our camera slower by having it follow something slower. We could do this by creating a second invisible actor that's always moving towards our golf ball and bump down its speed so it's always slower than the golf ball. Luckily, we don't have to build this from scratch since there's already a default blueprint called the tracking camera. Tap on the plus button and scroll down to add a tracking camera to our game. Let's go to the tracking camera's logic tab. We want the tracking camera to follow our golf ball, so we want to replace the existing character tag with our balls tag. While this rule looks complicated, it's essentially just making the tracking camera constantly update its velocity so that it's gliding towards the position of the nearest character, which we can make faster or slower by changing the tracking speed variable below. Let's click into the rule to replace the character tag with our ball tag. Because the character tag is a few layers deep in nested expressions, we need to click on the test tube icon a few times until we reach the layer where it's referenced. Then click on the character tag, remove it, and choose the ball tag. Tap Done to exit each nested expression, and be sure to replace the second character tag by repeating the same steps. Finally, drag the tracking camera into our game and place it close to the golf ball, since that will become the camera's starting position. Let's test it out. With a moving camera, our game's worlds can now be more expansive since we're no longer limited by the boundaries of our viewport. Let's take a moment to build out our golf course. Now that our game is more complex and challenging, why don't we integrate a leaderboard so players can compete and see how their performance compares to other players? With Castle's built-in leaderboard functionality, you can build a global leaderboard with just a couple of lines. First, we need to decide when a player's score is recorded to the leaderboard. For a lot of games, that would happen when the round ends, whether by winning or dying. For our golf game, we only want to record a player's score when they win. So let's navigate to the ball's logic where we define what happens when the ball collides with the hole. Inside this rule, we can see the conditional response we wrote in the last episode that displays one of two potential win messages. We aren't going to touch it. We're going to create another response for our trigger under it, so when the ball collides with the hole, it not only generates the win message, but it also will save our score to the leaderboard. You want to make sure your new response isn't inside of the condition above, because if you added your response here, then your score will only be saved when you have a hole in one. Tap the very last Add Response and select Save a Variable to the Leaderboard. Tap None and select Hits as our variable. Now your game will begin saving your players' scores to the leaderboard whenever they win, but there won't be any way to see that leaderboard yet. To let your players see the leaderboard, let's create a text box button that appears under the win message that sends your players to the leaderboard when tapped. Click on Add Response at the bottom and select Create a Text Box. Click on the quotation marks to edit that text box content and write Leaderboard. Under When Tapped, change Dismiss to Perform Response. Now inside of that response, tap on Select Response and select Show the Leaderboard for a variable. Click on None and select your hits variable. Because golf is a game where you're trying to win in as few hits as possible, we want the lowest values to be at the top of our leaderboard, so tap on High and change it to Low values on top. Then you can change the label to whatever makes sense for your game. And that's it. However, if we play our golf game, our leaderboard is empty. Don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. It's because you're currently playing in the editor, which is like a testing sandbox mode for your game. For the leaderboard to record your score, you need to play the game in its published form. With our game as complex as it is now, we certainly think it's ready to be seen by the world. To publish your game, go to the deck details by exiting the editor. Click on Share Your Deck and give it a caption. Then tap on Private to choose who can see this deck. You can post your deck publicly so it enters the Explore feed, or you can post it as unlisted, which only lets people with the link play. Finally, press Save. Congrats, you've posted your first deck to Castle. Now that your game is live, you can test out your leaderboard. If you posted your game publicly, you can find it on your profile. If you posted it as an unlisted deck, copy the link in the deck settings and paste it into the Castle search bar. To make sure your leaderboard is working, play a few rounds and try to beat your high score. Beyond testing it yourself, getting friends to try your game can be really helpful too. You can use the share button to send them your game, which they can play even if they don't have the Castle app. As a quick tip, if you want to reset your leaderboard and remove all player scores from it, just rename your leaderboard variable. For example, if you change your global hits variable to hits 2, it refreshes the existing leaderboard while automatically updating all mentions of hits in your logic to hits 2 instead. Today, we made our game bigger, more challenging, and more competitive. We learned how to use rules to modify behavior properties to create interesting obstacles. like the sand trap that increased our ball's gravity. We learned how to move our viewport so we can create expansive worlds. We learned how to incorporate a leaderboard into our game. Finally, we learned how to publish our game so it can be discovered by the Castle community. Now that you have the tools to build dynamic, complex games, Season 1 of Castle Academy concludes here. Stay tuned for more advanced tutorials coming soon.